What's happening, people? Welcome to the channel. This evening, I'm going to be talking about Godzilla versus Kong, the movie that just came out yesterday on HBO, or probably 2 days after I put this up. Anyways, have you seen it? Because I seen it, and I'm going to tell you what I think about it. There's going to be spoilers here. First, I'll tell you what I think about it, and then the spoilers will come along after that. What do I think about Godzilla versus Kong? It's you know, it, it's something a lot of people have been looking forward to it. I can tell you that. It's beautiful. Some of it's beautiful the way it's filmed. The fight scenes are really cool between Kong and Godzilla. Um, you've seen some of them on the trailer. You've seen some of the fighting going on the trailer for the movie. The story, however, is pretty bad. I mean, the writing for this movie is bad. It's like they were like, hey, you know, we let's make a movie where Godzilla and King Kong fight each other, um, but there's got to be a story. So I don't know what's the story going to be. Let's come up with something, So I don't know. It's very weird. It's almost like three stories going on at one time, um, and it just doesn't seem to work. And there's so much in this movie that just doesn't make sense. When you're watching it, it's just like, okay, boy, are they jumping the shark in this movie? So, um, anyways, that's kind of what I think about it. Did I enjoy? Yeah, if you have HBO Plus, give it a watch. Why not? You just kind of take away any common sense and just enjoy it for the fight scenes between Kong and Godzilla. That's what I got to say about the movie itself. Is this some kind of an award-winning movie? Maybe visually, special effects. It looked really good. It really did. Um, looked pretty fantastic. The story itself very lacking. I don't think they're going to win any awards for the writing of this. And some of it didn't even. I don't know. Some of the storylines didn't even need to be. There's these different stories, and it keeps zipping back and forth between what's going on here and what's going on there. You know, I don't need it. I don't know if it even needed to be done that way. I don't think it needed to be done that way. It's again, it's like I said, just enjoy it for what it is. Kind of mindless sci-fi. When I was a kid, we watched King Kong or Godzilla movies. Me and my brothers, we'd watch the old original Godzilla movies, and they're silly. You watch them today, it's like, yeah, okay, it's pretty silly, but we still enjoyed it for what it was. This giant monster that you know eventually was protecting people from other monsters that would show up. So, anyways, that's what I think of the movie. And now comes the spoiler section. So if you don't want any spoilers, uh, then I suggest that you turn the video off now. So, anyways, this movie starts off showing Kong, and he's waking up from a slumber, in Skull Island, and he gets up and he's walking, stretching, and scratching his butt, and he picks up a tree that's about as tall as he is, and he strips everything off of it. And then he sees the little girl that you've seen in the trailers who has a connection with him. The little girl has a strong connection with Kong. Has grown up with him. She's from the original tribe or something on Skull Island. And the lady who's kind of there helping take care of Kong, has kind of adopted this little girl, I think, taking care of her as well. But anyways, so Kong, stands up and he takes this tree like a spear and he just chucks it in the air. And it's flying, and all of a sudden it sticks into the sky. And all this glass and pieces fall out. And that's when Kong realizes that he's living in the Truman Show. He's in a giant bubble on Skull Island, uh, where the sky and everything is all replicated, just like the Truman Show, where everything was fake over him, and he was just in this one area. So, I mean, I don't think he just realized that. Apparently, he keeps doing this and attacking the ceiling. Uh, you know, throwing things at the sky in his Truman World dome that he lives in, and he's not happy. He's quite unhappy about this. So, anyways, then the story switches over to 11 from Stranger Things with no, wait, first what happens is then it goes to Godzilla. Godzilla attacks um, Apex Cybernetics. It's a company in Pensacola, Florida, and it shows Godzilla swimming up there, and he comes out of the water, and then he attacks the place, and he kills some people, uh, robs a few of them, picks their pocket, I think, and then swims back into the ocean. And now there's all this news about now Godzilla is now turned on people. He's not the Titan protector anymore. I guess Titans is what they call the other monsters, and Godzilla protects people from these other Titans that come up meaning to do harm. And so now he's not the Titan protector anymore. Now he's turned on people. So then it shows 11. She's in her classroom. And then she goes home or whatever, and she listens to this podcast. This guy's got a podcast. Um, the guy, he works at Apex Cybernetics to get on the inside because he thinks there's something going on there in this company. And then he does a podcast called Titan Truth, and he's trying to figure out the truth of what's going on with Godzilla. And so 11 meets up with her friend, who is the kid from the Christmas Chronicles 2. He's the bad elf who goes rogue and starts trying to take over the North Pole. He's also the kid from Deadpool with all the power and turns bad in Deadpool. And so they take off to find this podcast guy because she's all into the podcast. She believes the same thing. Something has turned Godzilla, but the people, of course, the main people, the big people, her dad, and the military and all that, they just think that Godzilla's just turned bad. So they take off to find this podcast guy. Meanwhile, the head guy of Apex shows up at this other main character's house, another sideline story where he is telling him, he's talking to him. He wrote a book about the hollow Earth, right? There's supposed to be a hollow core to the Earth in the center of the Earth, and that's where all these Titans are born. That's where they come from. Godzilla, King Kong, all of them, Mothra, King Seesaw. I don't know if you ever watched all those old Godzilla movies, but they all come from this hollow Earth, and so there's like an energy down there, an energy source, and this guy from Apex wants the energy source. So he's talking to this guy him and his brother was doing all kinds of research on the hollow Earth, and he wrote a book. And his brother was killed trying to get into the hollow Earth because apparently when you get into the hollow Earth, gravity switches, and when he got down to the core, gravity switched, and the pressure smashed his brother and killed him. So, anyways, he talks him into, hey, he told him, and he said, well, I have a ship I've made these ships that can withstand that pressure. So he's like, okay, basically I'm in. So this guy travels to Skull Island because he knows the lady there who's watching over Kong. They have Kong in this bubble to protect him from Godzilla because there can only be one Titan. And if Godzilla ever finds Kong, she knows that they'll fight. And he'll probably kill King Kong. So The guy shows up there. He's like, hey, I can help you out. I know where Kong comes from. If we can get him to go, you know, if we can take him, get him off the island, we can take him to Antarctica. There's a tunnel there that goes to the center, to the hollow Earth where he's from, and he might find family there. So, and also lead them to this energy source that they need to protect themselves from Godzilla. So they take Kong on the ship. Kong, from what I've figured out, my measurements, the little girl is about the size of King Kong's fingernail, maybe not even all of it. So I would say a full-grown person, like if I was King Kong, would be about the size of my first knuckle right there, maybe. So doing measurement, I figure King Kong is about 430 feet tall, or 43 stories is what I would figure him to be. Weighing about 1.5 million pounds. So they have him on a container ship, a big container ship. Now I've looked up the largest container ship's about 1,200 feet long. So he's about the right size. He's about a third of the size of that container ship, over 400 feet long. So that works out about right. The problem is when Godzilla attacks, he jumps. He jumps from one ship, lands on another ship, lands on an aircraft carrier. This 43-story, 430 foot tall, 1.5 million pound gorilla just lands on the deck and it kind of bops up and down instead of just destroying it like it would. So, I mean, there's some ridiculous things in the movie like that. So there's a big fight between Kong and Godzilla takes Kong and he takes him down into the ocean and starts pulling him down to the bottom of the ocean to drown him. So they drop depth charges to confuse Godzilla, and it works. And he releases Kong, and Kong swims back up and collapses on the deck of a ship. And then they're like, "Oh, what are we gonna do?" And then so the one guy's like, "Oh, just shut everything down because Godzilla's stupid and he'll think we're all dead. We're gonna play dead." So they shut all the ships down and all the guns. And Godzilla comes up and he's like, "Oh, they must be dead. While I was down there under the water, they must all died." So then he swims off, and then now they're just sitting there trying to figure out what they're gonna do. Meanwhile, the girl and 11 and the bad elf from Christmas Chronicles and the podcast guy, they also are sneaking into Apex because they're trying to figure out what's going on. And they get onto a little ship. They go into a little ship to hide, and there's all these egg things with skull crawlers from Skull Island. And they're like, "What does Apex need with skull crawlers for?" And then all of a sudden the ship takes off and it's shooting through this tunnel that goes from Pensacola, Florida to Hong Kong. It's a big tunnel, long tunnel. So they're shooting through this tunnel heading to Hong Kong. So anyways, they're like back at the ship with Kong, and they're basically wondering what they're going to do because they start moving again. Godzilla's going to come back and kill everybody. So he's like, "Hey, does he like heights?" So they saved the day by bringing about 10 or 15, maybe 15 military helicopters and the world's largest net that they just gathered up really fast. A net that's God knows how big. It's the world's largest net. It's holding a 43-story gorilla. And these 15 helicopters pick up this 1.5 million pounds plus the net, and they fly King Kong to the Antarctica, and they sit him down gently, and then they fly off. Yeah, that's what happened. 15 helicopters carries like 1.5 million pounds, and the world's largest net that they just happen to just have laying around to carry this giant gorilla to Antarctica. Yeah. So yeah, that was kind of laughable, and so they get there and they talk Kong, and they have the little girl, because the little girl, she has secretly taught King Kong how to speak sign language. So she talks to King Kong with sign language. I don't know sign language, so I don't know what I'm doing here. But anyways, she talks to him with sign language because she doesn't speak. The little girl doesn't speak. So she talks with sign language. She's taught King Kong how to communicate with her. And so they have her talk Kong into going into the hole that goes to the middle of the earth by telling him that his family might be down there. So he just takes off down there. And they go following him. And then, then they fall through this hole all the way to the center of the earth, where, Kong, grabs it. Basically the center of the earth. There's mountains. There's greenery. The sun's shining bright down there in the center of the earth. The water's flowing. Like I said, there's trees and grass. All kinds of life down there with the sun shining brightly in the center of the earth. So they get there, and basically there's like rocks floating in between. There's mountains on each side kind of poking towards each other. And I guess gravity has reversed for some reason right in the center of the earth. And now these two sections are pulling this way instead of the way it should be, like pulling this way. So the rocks that are floating in the middle are floating there, and if like Kong touches some, and as soon as they leave that, they catch the gravity, and then they fall towards whatever side they're heading to. So for some reason, the gravity is reversed there. That's the only way they can make this work. Yeah, so so they've made it to the center of the earth, and they're following Kong. And you go back to first of all, earlier there's foreshadowing when 11 and the Bad Elf and the podcaster are talking. He pulls out a flask, and they're like, "Oh, he's got a flask in a holster. He's got a flask in a holster." And he's like, "Yeah, my wife gave it to me. She passed away. She's the love of my life." And so all of that is just to set up something later in the movie. The whole thing about his flask and a holster. They put all this into the movie to set up something really dumb in the movie later on. But so they end up showing up to Apex, Hong Kong, and they get out and they walk into this giant room, and that's where they come face to face with Mechagodzilla.
That's Godzilla. No, that's Mechagodzilla.
And all these skull crawlers are basically there for Mechagodzilla to fight, so they can practice fighting with these things. And so that's where they first see Mechagodzilla. And he kills a skull crawler by blasting this thing through. The only problem is he's using a off-brand battery, and he needs like the Duracell or a copper top or an Energizer from the center of the earth so he can last longer. So he runs out of battery real fast, just fighting one skull crawler. So that's why they need this extra battery energy source from the hollow earth, so Mechagodzilla can run a little longer like the Energizer Bunny. So back at the middle of the earth, Kong is running along. He sees a giant gorilla hand sticking from the other side, and then he jumps up through and then lands on the other side because gravity's reversed there. And they follow him, and he finds these big doors, and he opens them. They got handprints, and he goes in, and that's where he finds his big magic axe. He finds his big magical axe, and he's like, "Yeah!" And then he sits down, and they're like, "What's going on?" He's supposed to bring us this energy, and then the axe starts growing blue. The axe is basically, if you look at it, it's like one of the plates off of Godzilla's back, strapped to a bone. That's pretty much what the axe is. So it starts glowing blue like Godzilla does when he's about to like shoot his big blue ray out of his mouth. So it's basically the same energy source as Godzilla has. And so the scientists that went there with him are like, "Oh, okay, there it is." So they go to collect it, and basically they just they just they scan it to see what it's made of, and they send that scan back to Apex, where they quickly replicate it within a few minutes. This odd, crazy power source that they know nothing about. They get the signatures of it, and they replicate it in a few minutes so they can use it in Mechagodzilla. Uh, so when he lights the axe up, Godzilla has now shown up in Hong Kong and has already started killing people. Just blows a bridge down and then comes up on shore, and has already begun his slaughtering of the innocent people. And so they start to use the energy source that they just quickly replicated out of thin air with Mechagodzilla, and Mechagodzilla comes alive. Uh, and then basically he does a Cyberdyne and starts thinking for himself and says, "Screw you humans, I'm the computer now," and he kills the main guy. And then but in the meantime, while that's going on, Kong has already. Oh, he when Kong lit up the magical axe, Godzilla realized what it was, and he blasted a hole through the earth to the center of the earth. It's all erratic because the whole movie is kind of erratic. It just keeps jumping from this to this to this to this to this to this. That's the way it is. So he blasts a hole through the earth all the way to the center. For some reason, I guess to give him a way out. So Kong jumps up and runs up the hole, and then they fly after him, and he comes out of the hole with his magic axe and starts fighting Godzilla, and they're just fighting all over the place, and they're just smashing buildings. They kill probably about I don't know, maybe 2 million people. There's 7.5 million people live in Hong Kong, so they probably wipe out about 2 million people in their fight, and just building after building, just smashing them down. So basically, Kong or Godzilla starts getting the best of Kong, and they're fighting, and they're back and forth, and then Godzilla's got Kong on the ground, and he's about to kill him, and he's got his foot on his chest, and then they realize that both of their mother's name is Martha, so they kind of look at each other, and they're like, "Oh," and then they kind of yell at each other a little bit, and then Godzilla just walks away and leaves Kong sitting there. Um, so, so go back inside. Mechagodzilla has now become Cyberdyne Systems, has become self-aware, and has now taken over himself. And he busts out of the mountainside facility, and just immediately, using his big old flame mouth and his new Energizer battery that he has, and just starts blasting buildings down and kills about another 1 million people. And then Godzilla runs over, and they start fighting each other, and Mechagodzilla is kicking Godzilla's ass all over the place. So in the meantime, now Kong is having a heart attack on the ground, and his heart's stopping. So they use the ship with all the energy in it that can withstand all that pressure in the Middle Earth, and they land it on his chest, and they use it like a defibrillator, and they shock his heart back into beating. And then Kong jumps up, and then he joins the fight. And then Kong and Godzilla start tag teaming Mechagodzilla, and they're fighting him, but Mechagodzilla is still kind of kicking both their asses. And in the meantime, Kong and Godzilla and Mechagodzilla are still killing thousands of people, knocking buildings over, and uh, then Kong finds his axe, and he's fighting Mechagodzilla with his axe, and then Godzilla lights up his axe for him, super energizes it with his blue energizer energy, and he chops Mechagodzilla up into a bunch of pieces and rips his head off in his signature Kong move, and drops it on the ground. And then King Kong is tired. He's exhausted, so he sits down next to a building and kills another 550 people when he sits on them. And then he sees Godzilla, and then he gets up with the axe, and the little girl comes over and signs to him that he's a friend, not an enemy. So they look at each other, and Godzilla's like, you know, I ain't gonna start nothing if you ain't gonna start nothing. And Kong looks back at him and says, all right. He drops his axe, and I ain't gonna start shit. If you don't start shit, ain't gonna be no shit. And then Godzilla gives him the look, and then jumps in the ocean and swims away. And then King Kong and his group of people go back to the middle of the earth, to his home, to the hollow center of the earth where the sun shines brightly and everything is green and beautiful. And they live happily ever after. And that's the movie in a nutshell. In a nutshell. So, as you can see, the story's pretty ridiculous, but the fight scenes are cool. And I'm guessing about half the population of Hong Kong was killed. Although they did mention quickly after Godzilla had already attacked the city that they're going to start evacuating the city. So they may have evacuated 7.5 million people in about 5 minutes. So I'm guessing that's what they did. That was their way of covering up the fact that otherwise, 3 million people would have been killed in Hong Kong. So there it is. Did you see Godzilla versus Kong? Did you love it? Did you think it was ridiculous? Again, this is one of those movies that you have to go into it with just a clear mind and try not to pick it apart. But some of the things are just so absurd. It's hard not to. But again, it looked beautiful. The animation, the CGI of the different Titans, Godzilla and Kong and Mechagodzilla looked really cool. So the fights were really cool to watch, But anyways, I still enjoyed the movie, even though it was pretty ridiculous. The writing was bad. But I still enjoyed it for what it was. So anyways, if you want to watch it, check it out on HBO. And I don't know, let me know what you think about it down below. But anyways, if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Thank you for subscribing, and I'll see you next time. I'm Chewy Solo, and this is Black and Red. See ya!